Hi, Ben Constable with you from Spark Systems. Today I'll walk you through the steps to creating a new model in Enterprise Architect. By the end of the session, I want you to feel comfortable creating a simple model like this one. You might like to follow along in your own copy of Enterprise Architect, so I'll slow the pace of this webinar a little. Here's what we'll do. First, assuming that you have Enterprise Architect installed, we'll open the application and explain some of the screens you see on startup. Next, we'll create a brand new model repository and use some of VA's built-in model patterns to give us a head start. As we build up the model, I'll explain how the elements in your model hierarchy relate to the diagrams you draw. I'm creating a use case model today, but you'll be able to apply the tools and techniques I use for other model types as well. Finally, I'll show you how to generate some useful items from the model to share with others, specifically images of your model and a quick and easy report in document form. You see I have Enterprise Architect installed here. I happen to be using a Linux Mint desktop environment, but you can follow along with whatever operating system you have. So just double click Enterprise Architect to get started. You see that I'm using a trial version of Enterprise Architect. So I click to continue my trial, and now I'm prompted here to choose which edition of VA to use. This gives me a sense of which functionality I can access for a given edition. So desktop for basic modeling, corporate edition and above for working in teams, and ultimate edition here has the lot. For this exercise really any of these will do. So click OK to continue to start up. Now, the first time you run Enterprise Architect, you're prompted to adjust the basic look and feel of the application. I'm going to choose a slightly more colourful theme here and apply that, but the rest of the appearance options, I'm just going to leave them exactly as they are. Now, here's the important part for our webinar today. When you open Enterprise Architect, you're prompted to either open an existing project, perhaps one of the recent ones listed here, or you can create a new project. And that's exactly what we want to do. So I'll create a new project. I'm just going to store that on my desktop. Here it is. I'll name the file my first model, that'll do. But just notice I can choose one of two file types, EAP or FEAP. There are some minor differences between these, but in either case, you'll get a file containing your model repository. One thing I do like about the FEAP format, it supports Unicode model data out of the box, so you can enter more diverse text in your model. You can do the same with EAP, but you do need to configure that first. Each time you create a new project, Enterprise Architect prompts you with the model wizard, because really an empty model structure here can be a daunting start. So the model patterns give your project a handy kickstart by providing a range of model stubs that you can build on. So a business analyst may be interested in the BPMN starter models. A systems engineer might start with a SysML model stub. A database engineer might choose one of the database patterns, or domain experts might choose something more specific. Say a GIS specialist might work with ArcGIS or GML and so on. But today, why don't we just start with a plain UML2 use case model, and maybe even add a domain model in there as well. So let's add those to our project now, and remember these are just model stubs to help us get started. Notice EA is copied in the package stubs with their diagrams and elements. Before I explain these further, I'll arrange my desktop to give myself a bit more room by dismissing some of the windows I'm not using yet, such as the properties here and the notes. I'll slide the project browser across a bit. Now I can always get those windows back again by using this handy window button here. So the properties are there and the notes. Now I'll use this to dismiss the navigation toolbar, and when using EA in a presentation, I'll typically hide the status bar here to help focus on the main view. You just do that via the preferences and click hide status bar. So now we have the model file and we have the beginnings of a use case model here. I'm going to build upon this to model an example system that you're likely familiar with now, a webinar management system. We'll model the users of the system, or actors, which includes you as attendees, and we'll model the basic use cases or functions, such as joining the webinar. So where do we start? Well, first, let's look closely at the structure of the model. In Enterprise Architect, the model structure, or hierarchy, is represented in the project browser here. It's a bit like how you use a file explorer in your operating system to organize folders and files. The packages here, just like folders or directories, are really containers for other items, in this case, elements and diagrams. The first node shown here is a diagram, and we open a diagram by double-clicking it. This invokes a drawing canvas, a visual editor for our elements, if you like. The diagram, provided for us by the model pattern, shows the packages and their contents in this case. And from here we can drill down into the first child diagram of the package, and you'll notice the correspondence here between the drawing canvas and the project browser. For our first change to the model, let's describe some of the actors or users of the webinar management system. So who are some of the users of such a system? For one, you typically have an organizer who's responsible for creating the webinar, starting and ending the session, among other things. Let's use this existing element and rename it as organizer. One way I can do that is to select it on the diagram, click the name compartment, and by clicking again, I enter edit mode. So that was easy. So we've just changed our first property in the model, that is the name for this element. Notice that it was automatically updated in the project browser as well. There are many other properties that elements have, and to see them, you can right-click, choose Properties, and besides the name here, we can also type some notes. I'll just paste some of those in there. Describe some responsibilities of the organizer. Apart from that, elements can have stereotypes, a project status, alias, and others. We won't cover all of these today. Rather, let's add some more users for our webinar system. So who else do we need? Well, a presenter, and most important from my point of view, you, the attendees. We can model these users by creating new elements via the diagram toolbox here. Because this is a use case diagram, the toolbox lists the relevant element types for me. So simply drag and drop. There's our presenter. And attendee. They're shown on the diagram and in the model hierarchy. Before we go further, I want to discuss an important distinction we make in modeling between what we call model elements here and diagram elements. When we talk about model elements, we're usually referring to one of these items in the model hierarchy, again represented in Enterprise Architect's project browser. Each of these elements can exist independently of any diagram. They may be shown on one or more diagrams or none. In any case, they are still part of the model and help define what the model means. Once we draw one of these model elements on a diagram, perhaps by drag and drop from the project browser, we create what's called a diagram element. This is just a representation or view of the underlying element in the model hierarchy. Whatever we do here on the diagram to change its appearance, say for example the shape or the size of the element, the font color, that sort of thing, well, that doesn't really change the meaning or semantics of the model. We can easily undo it. Now, the difference between the model elements and diagram elements can be confusing because depending on your experience with various modeling tools and techniques, you may be inclined to think that if I delete an element from a diagram, like this, that it's also destroyed in my model. But that's not the case at all, as you can see in the hierarchy here. All I did was make a diagrammatic change, which I can undo here. Perhaps we could illustrate it this way. Consider the difference between a person and a photograph of a person. Well, a person, just like a model element, can exist whether there are any photographs of them or not. The photograph, just like a diagram element, can highlight certain aspects of a person. It can show physical attributes, family and work relationships, and so on. In the same way, as you take elements in the model hierarchy and draw them on diagrams, it's the diagram elements that help you to highlight certain aspects of the model, such as the properties of an element or its relationships to other model elements. And just as a person can be shown in many photographs, the same element can be drawn in many diagrams. Now you might say, well, don't we have to draw an element on a diagram to create it in the model in the first place? So doesn't that mean that the model element really does depend on a diagram element? Well, no, it doesn't. Although we often do draw the model element while we first create it, there are many other ways to create elements in the model without using a diagram element. Coming back to our person and photograph analogy, the model element being created is analogous to a person born as a baby. Now, while it's true that many parents will take a photograph of their newborn baby, others may choose not to. Does the fact that no photograph of the baby exists yet mean that that person doesn't exist? Clearly not. Similarly, we can add elements to our model without drawing or photographing them first. Let me briefly demonstrate one such approach. In the project browser, I can right-click a package to add elements directly, so we also need a moderator in our webinar system. Right-click and choose Add Element. Select the type of element that I want. So under Use Case here, we want an actor. So we simply type in the element's name here. Now save and exit. And the moderator now exists whether or not I choose to draw it on a diagram like this one. For example, when I choose link here, I'm just saying this is a link to the original element here. So I can draw it, I can delete it from this diagram, but it has no effect on the moderator element in the model hierarchy. To finish creating our simple model, we'll add some use case elements and model the relationships between them and our users. In the primary use cases package, I already have a diagram with a couple of use cases created for me by the model pattern. The lines going from the actor and crossing over into the system boundary here target a use case. So these are examples of what we call relationships in the model. As with elements, relationships can exist in the model even if they aren't drawn on diagrams. Notice if I attempt to delete the connector, right-click, delete connector, I'm prompted as to whether I really want to remove it from the model completely or just hide it in this diagram. Although these relationships aren't shown in EA's project browser, there are other windows you can use for viewing and editing them, such as the Relationships window. So selecting an element, I see its relationships. From there I can choose one, right-click, and navigate to the target or source, access the relationship properties, and so on. Now let's describe our use cases. An organizer needs to create a webinar and start a webinar. Remember, we can quickly rename elements in place. Select the element, click the name label, and click again to enter edit mode. Also, pressing the F2 key will let you rename in place. Now I'm going to make some space here for our other actors by deleting this explanatory note. And as I drop elements from the hierarchy to the diagram, I'm prompted to select an action. By choosing link here, I'm saying I want to draw a simple reference to the original element. And the options I checked indicate that's what I always want unless I hold control as I do that. So you'll notice no prompt this second time round. So let's add two more use cases for these actors: register for webinar and join webinar. Again, make a little bit of space for them, in the system boundary there. So the first one, register for webinar. Then join webinar. You'll notice I use the quick linker here to conveniently add appropriate relationships between my elements. And the toolbox provides another way to do this. You see under the use case relationships compartment there. So you get the idea how I could expand this now to a full-blown use case model. Just a quick note on saving your work. In Enterprise Architect, generally speaking, you only need to save changes you make to the appearance of a diagram. Other changes, like editing the element name, are saved automatically. You'll notice the asterisk on the diagram tab here, indicating there are changes pending. Or you can just right-click the tab there to save your diagrammatic changes. Similarly, undoing and redoing changes is generally only available for diagrammatic changes, such as moving elements and resizing them, like this. So there's a quick way to make elements the same size. I'll just adjust their position slightly and align the actors there. So now for changes like this, I could use Ctrl-Z and Ctrl-Y, or you could use the layout ribbon as I'm doing here to undo those diagrammatic changes. Before we finish today, I want to show 2 ways you can share your model content with colleagues or other stakeholders. Because one of the fundamental benefits of modeling is to facilitate communication and gain a shared understanding of your model system. One way to share the model is by exporting the diagrams as image files. That way you can insert them into presentation slides or other documents. It's really simple to do. With your diagram open, go to the Publish ribbon, click Save Image, Save to File, and you have a range of image formats. The first 5 or so are your normal raster images like PNG and so forth, and the last 2, WMF and EMF, are vector image formats. So they're good if you want to scale the image up and keep them looking sharp. So let's try a PNG, save it to the desktop. Here it is. And you can see our image there. There's a watermark in the background, just indicates I'm using the trial installation of Enterprise Architect. Obviously, you don't get that when you install the registered version. The next way to share model information is via a report. EA generates various kinds of documentation from the model, ranging from web pages to Word and PDF documents. Of course, there are many ways you can customize document generation to suit your own company's standards, but today I'll show you how to quickly generate a basic report using a built-in template. You simply click the package you want to report on. In fact, it could be the entire model if you click the model root node here. Today, let's report on our use case model. So again, from the Publish ribbon, choose Document, Generate Documentation. And in the document generation window, I say where the output file should go. On the desktop for this demonstration is fine. I can choose from a range of built-in templates. Today I'm using the use case summary template. I can choose a cover page, a table of contents, and there are various other options. For example, do I want to show or hide diagram borders? Well, let's show them today. So click Generate. And in a very short space of time, I get a decent report of my model that I can share. So let's open it up and have a look. So here's our cover page here, followed by our table of contents. And you can see our model elements and packages are documented along with the diagrams. Let's open up and have a look at our use case diagram here. There we go. And our actors are all included there. Click on the organizer, we see the notes that we typed in for that one as well. So today I've shown you the basic tools and steps you need to start your modeling project. Recall I showed you how to start up Enterprise Architect and create a new file-based model repository using the patterns from the Model Wizard to get a head start in your new project. Then we edited and expanded the model stub, adapting it to our webinar management project. And finally, you saw how to share your work outside of Enterprise Architect by means of exported images and auto-generated documentation. There are certainly many more tools available in Enterprise Architect that can help in various ways, and there are other aspects of modelling that I haven't covered in this brief session. I'm listing just some of these on screen here. In our next webinar, I'll look specifically at how to build simple UML class models for data or information modelling and software design. In the meantime, if you want to find out more about any of the topics I just mentioned, we have a range of learning resources available, from prior webinar sessions that explore more specialised topics to professional training services offered by our partners. I've listed just some of these resources here. Well, I hope you found this introduction to Enterprise Architect useful. Until next time, happy modelling.